Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR Here and Now. And I'm George Binns, and the guest this evening is a old friend from many more previous discussions, Kevin O'Reilly. Now, he lists himself as a resident of Beverly, but you're really deep into this environmental stuff, activist, green stuff and all that. So the show tonight we wanted to talk about was what's happening in the state of Massachusetts relative to the greening of the state. So where's things happening these days?
Well, thanks, George. So first of all, I want to say that I am one person. I don't speak for groups of people.
But you know what you're talking about, so that
well,
helps.
hopefully I do, but my knowledge is limited, and I'll outline a few things about what I see going on in the state, and then a few things locally, because I think Beverly is a pretty unique community.
Yeah.
So I have to put my glasses on here so I can see what I'm doing. In 2009, Massachusetts was part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, people call it RGGI, and that led to higher electric rates, more insulation of homes, and lower emissions. They cut emissions by around 50%. And the overall cost to people was about the same. Actually, it was probably a little less. So the rate per kilowatt was higher, but the number of kilowatts used went down. So it was a very successful program that other states look at. In March of 2021, the Massachusetts passed the roadmap law. We always refer to it as a roadmap bill. And that sets a level of 50% by 2030. So cutting emissions to 50% of what they were in 1990. And then by 2050 to be net zero. And
what do you mean by net zero? This term keeps going around.
It might be that there are some emissions, but there can be offsets. So there might be planting trees in order to offset the emissions that are there. But the net effect is no carbon additions
So
from
you're going to
Massachusetts.
get it without a carbon tax.
I'll talk about the carbon tax later on, but that one has no tax on there.
Okay.
It sets these goals, and then we have to meet those goals.
So for every emission, you've got to have some way of sucking up that. When you talk about emissions, we're talking strictly carbon dioxide, right?
Yeah, there might be methane in there, but I think it's carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's any carbon dioxide emissions going on in 2050, there is some mechanism to suck that out of the atmosphere and sequester it.
Yes.
So that's what net zero comes down to.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about bills in the legislature that are in there now, but I did want to mention that, because I think this is very important to the viewers out there, Mass Save just at the beginning of February, so today or maybe tomorrow, they are now going to be giving $10,000 rebates per unit for heat pumps. It's more complicated than that. I tried to understand it, but they've made a significant change in getting people to switch their heating. So people are going to want to look at the Mass Save website and look for those $10,000 rebates on the heat pumps. If you owned an apartment building and you put heat pumps in 3 apartments, you'd get that 3 times.
Yeah.
So it's meant to help renters especially. So that's something that people could do right now, and that's a big change. That was due to pressure from the legislature. Last month, a bill went forward from the TUE committee. I'm going to mention that a few times. So this is Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee. That's where the bills go for climate change. And they advanced a bill for windmills, for more offshore wind. What it does is removes a price cap on when people bid on these offshore farms. the way it has been is the next bid has to be lower than the previous bid. So if you did a wind farm before and you were going to do another one, your bid has to be lower than the previous one. And what this bill does is remove the cap. So prices may go up, but the argument, and I don't have anything to do with this bill, so the argument is that it's limiting the number of bids on on these offshore, and if they remove the cap, they'll get more bids, and in the end, maybe the prices will be higher, maybe they'll be lower, but one thing is there'll be a lot more of them, so we'll get more offshore wind. So that bill is moving forward. It's going to Ways and Means now, so that's one that you might want to watch. In the legislature now, or in the TUE committee now, is a few bills. I just outlined 4 of them. The Green Future Act is the one that I've been working on. So that one I could talk about because I was on the committee to write the bill. I didn't write the bill, but I argued about, hey, put this in, take that out. So that's one bill, but I'll come back to that. The second one is the Clean Act, and it takes the Next Generation Roadmap bill and it moves those timelines up so that we'd be net zero by 2045 instead of 2050, for example. So that's another bill. There's a Building Justice with Jobs Act, and that focuses on retrofitting houses. It's almost completely focused on that one area, and they figure it's going to bring a lot of jobs in. Now, some of these jobs they're difficult jobs. They're climbing in people's attics to insulate them and things like that. But it would bring about jobs. And then the Heat Act is for ground source heat pumps, and they're actually starting to do it now, where there's micro districts. So they take a street, for example, Bennett Street in Beverly, and if they got the grant to do that street, they would dig up the street, put in ground source heat pumps, and then the water would be heated up for all the buildings on that street. And that's a bill that's in the TUE right now.
Well, the basis of a heat pump is it's a refrigerator that runs backwards and forwards.
Right.
So that you can get heat out of it in the wintertime and you get cooling out of it in the summertime.
Right.
So are they going to pump cool water into these houses in the summertime so you can air condition them too?
Yeah, absolutely. So the temperature is 54 degrees coming out summer and winter. So to heat something up from 54 to 65 is less than it would be otherwise. And to cool it down from 54, it's already cooling down. So in the summertime,
relatively cool.
They are 10 times as efficient as fossil fuel, so a gas furnace, things like that. So it's very efficient. And right now we have $9 billion worth of repairs to the natural gas pipelines in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
There's just so many of them need to be repaired. And one question is, well, why? Maybe we should start thinking about not repairing them and replacing them with water that's coming out of the ground, and then we can heat them up. It's not a pipe dream. I'll show you that with Beverly. Okay, second thing I wanted to talk about, whoops, hit it too many times, is local Beverly. So we have a sustainability group in Beverly, and they would love to get on and explain more about what they're doing. I know a little bit about it, but so they've already done solar fields. There's about 12 megawatts of solar coming out of solar fields. They have a ground source heat pump for the new police station.
Yep.
And that's, if I remember correctly, it saves about $100,000 to have that. So that's been a real plus. When we have friends visit, I always say, that's the police station, and that has a ground source heat pump. The LED streetlights have saved a lot of money, and Beverly got $2 million for those from state grants for those lights. They're going to save a lot of money. Green schools, they've put in I got this today from the city website, 13 EV stations. They're working with Salem Resilient together, and they have an electric bus now.
Yeah.
In
What's
the-
an EV station?
So they have some at the middle school, so you can go and plug your car in,
Okay, if you got an
electric car.
got a hybrid or an electric car, you can plug it in,
Yes,
recharge it.
yep.
Okay,
Thanks for clarifying.
yeah. Well, that's half the game is,
Yeah,
the jargon. What did you say, Pete?
right. I had that as a teacher.
Yeah.
You got to always explain. Okay, in the future, they're planning to have a canopy for the high school and middle school parking lots. A canopy that would have solar panels on it. That's a convenient place to put them. They are talking about possibly a ground source heat pump for the library. Library needs to redo its heating system. It's different than the police station because that was a new building.
Yeah.
So this would be a little more complicated. They're going to upgrade the solar array, the old one on the hill by the high school.
That thing's ancient, yeah.
Yeah, but it was good in terms of educating people.
Yeah,
That part's good. And they're hoping to get a second electric bus. And I'm sure there are lots of more things going on. So the one thing that I am involved in is the Green Future Act. So this bill, so when we look at the roadmap bill, the estimate is that we would need to retrofit 1 million houses and have 1 million electric vehicles by 2030 to meet those goals. This is from the governor's research office.
yeah.
So last year, that's 100,000 homes a year. And last year we retrofitted, with heat pumps and all, 451, not 100,000.
Yeah.
So that's how are we going to meet those goals?
Yeah.
And that's what was your question about, are we going to be doing carbon pricing?
Yeah.
And that's what this bill does. So what we would be doing if this bill passes is what we call a market-based mechanism. So it's either a carbon price or a cap and trade system. I would favor the straight carbon price, but it would be left up to the governor how to do it. So with that money, half of it would go to a green infrastructure fund for the state. And that fund would be for whatever the state feels are important. So it would be a lot more solar, a lot more wind, public transportation improvements, those kinds of things. I have a slide on that, so if you want to know more about it. So half the money goes to that. A quarter of the money goes to local cities and towns. We estimate that Beverly would get about $4 million from this over 8 years. And as you saw, Beverly is very favorably disposed to get the other money from the state. So that the municipal money is designated just for, so Beverly gets 4 million, Hamilton gets whatever, 1 million. It's already designated. They just have to decide how to use the money in terms of reducing emissions or resiliency. They can't use it for, something else. And then a quarter of the money goes for rebates for the lowest 40% of household incomes. So the idea there was, we don't want this to be a regressive tax. A gas tax is a regressive tax. We want to rebate money to the lowest 40%, so this is a progressive tax. People above 40% have more resources to switch. So they could switch to a heat pump or other things. So we want to hold harmless the bottom 40%. We think that everybody in the bottom 40% would not see any increase in price. Net. They would see the increases in price, which is the whole point of carbon pricing, is to make disincentivize fossil fuels. There's a workforce development part of it, an environmental justice component, which I could talk about if you want me to, There's green bonding, so the state would be able to borrow against this revenue coming in, and then the carbon price itself. So that's the Green Future Act. All these bills are in the TUE committee. They may vote tomorrow on this one. It could be delayed, but nobody really knows.
Guaranteed it's going to be delayed, yeah.
Yeah,
The legislature is not the most,
no, so we've been working on a bill like this for 6 years.
yeah, it's not the speediest.
No, well, and what happens is, this is why people say sausage isn't government. You don't want to see them made. In the past, the last iteration of this bill, they delayed the vote in February. They delayed it in May and then voted it down in June. And then it came up as an amendment in like the craziest at the end, July, at the end of the session. Most of the bills get passed in the last week.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The last night,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I've
so
seen it.
you understand the way legislator functions.
Yeah.
That was their
I
work.
will say that the TUE committee has a new chair, and they have been
Who's that?
Representative Roy. He's from Franklin, Mass. Not Franklin County. It's in Norfolk County, but Franklin, Mass.
Yeah.
They were just in Salem yesterday or the day. So yesterday was Monday. I think yesterday to look at the new assembly area for the wind turbines. They've toured battery factories in Massachusetts. They've really done a lot of work. I follow the chair on Twitter, and they're always doing things. So it isn't like they're doing nothing. I always thought they were basically doing nothing till the end, but they're doing a lot of work.
Well, I think one of the problems that bothers me about it is, yeah, all this stuff sounds good, but it's disconnected. Yeah, it's great to get free energy from the sun and either use it to make electricity with a solar cell or to drive the wind and pick it up with a wind turbine. But the classic example is Texas last year when the snow came and the wind turbines froze up and all the solar cells got covered and they didn't have any backup. So this is the thing that bothers me is that they talk up, oh yeah, it's great to have a solar cell on your roof, or it's great to have a wind turbine out on the Martha's Vineyard or someplace, but you want electricity 24/7. And if you start to get into electric heating and housing, either directly electric heating with just a hot wire, or get it into, like we've been talking about, with some sort of heat pump, either a ground-based or an air-based heat pump. You got to run that thing all the time because you need heat all the time, weather like this.
Right.
So this is the loose end that doesn't get talked about.
Well, I'm going to talk about it. I'm really glad you raised the issue because that was one part of the bill that I thought was really, really important. And that is, so I'm going to back up here. I was a history teacher, so I think of this in terms of the Industrial Revolution. What kind of problems did they face? So one of many problems when you have these kind of transitions is, what do you do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun isn't out? So that's an important issue. And that is not just battery storage. It's grid-level battery storage. You have to have some way of storing power for more than a few hours, like days. And that's one part of the bill. So how do we do that? We increase research and development and keep pushing for breakthroughs. So batteries now use lithium, and there's all kinds of bad things there. But now they're working on copper or I think like just regular metal, iron. And if they make that breakthrough, as we saw in the Industrial Revolution, once you have a breakthrough, it changes everything. And so, we need everybody. And, you're which is why this is great to have this conversation. Say, well, wait a minute, what about this? Well, we've got people then to try and work and solve that problem. We have to be able to overcome the problem of intermittency. We've got to be able to store the power we get. So one way to do this is to use a turbine, move the water up into a reservoir, and then when we need it, have it come back down and turns the turbine the other way.
Yes, pump powered storage.
But they're working, and again, this is the TUE committee has been looking at this. They've been touring these huge battery places to store the energy. We don't need it for a few hours. We need it for days or maybe weeks sometimes, and that's an important fact. But you brought up about Texas, and I really want to talk about that. The windmills in Iowa did not freeze up. The ones in Texas did. 10 years before this happened, they recommended that they insulate those wind turbines, and they didn't do it. So your point is important. We need to be smart how we do this. Changes are coming. There's no doubt about it. Whether you like it or not, there's going to be changes. And we need everybody. You have an engineering background. We need everybody to say, well, wait a minute, what about this and that? And that will make a better outcome for everybody. So I think it's important. Texas had, in 21 seasons, 4 seasons to a year, in 21 seasons, they had only 2 that were in the bottom coldest third based on previous ones. And they should have had 7. So are there going to be cold spells in Texas? Absolutely. But there just won't be as many as they would have been otherwise because the Earth is warming up. I think that Texas case is a really important example because it's, be careful not to pull out one thing to show a whole trend. We need averages.
Well, I think this is part of the problem that I think there's too much what I consider hype about, well, we got to do this to save the world from global warming. Or you come up with these stories that, okay, the world is warming up, but we had a heck of a snowstorm this past weekend.
We did.
And the explicatives describing it are dramatic in that, it's probably the worst ever, which it's going to be a new record. And I think part of the issue comes down to the information we're getting is all extremes. The world is going to come to an end because of global warming, or the storms are going to become terribly worse than they are now because of global warming and because of carbon dioxide. And as a result, it portrays a picture of impending disaster. And I think what's happening is a lot of solutions are thrown out to solve an impending disaster, and it's not really that bad. I can remember the winter of 78 and 98 and a few more of them, and hey, this is New England. And all those pictures by Courier and Ives where the sleighs are running through the woods, hey, that wasn't fake news. That was real.
Right.
Being a history teacher, you probably recognize that when the Pilgrims landed, it was in the middle of a snowstorm. And that was the way it is. So a lot of this stuff is, I think, over-exaggerated. One of the other ones that gets me is you talk about some of these donations that are made to solve your local problem. And I went through this exercise with National Grid several years ago. They came in and changed out all my light bulbs and did a few other things. And they said, okay, we'll give you a bonus if you have your house insulated. Oh, that's pretty good. That sounds like a good deal. But the first thing you got to do is get rid of the old lumen tube wiring. Oh, so some of these things come through sounding good, but when you start to get into the details, oh, well, you got to do this, and then you got to do that. And it's no longer as advantageous a program as it's first portrayed. So again, it's the details that just don't get spread around.
Well, I think, so to go back to your point about the exaggerating particular ones. There's no doubt that people for and against climate change pick out something and say, see, I told you, and that's what we have to resist. We have to say, well, wait a minute, what do the averages show us? Is the weather in Florida getting warmer or not? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I do agree with you that people can pull out one case or two cases and then say, see, this is oh my gosh, my hair's on fire. That's not helpful.
Yeah.
And I do agree that we need to be looking at the details. And if we're all looking at it, we're all saying, wait a minute, what about this and that? I don't think Mass Save has been perfect by any means.
No,
it's a difficult thing. But that's part of the job, I think, of the legislature, because it came out of legislation to oversee. And again, they're not always as great as they should be.
Yeah. So, believe it or not, we've gotten to the tail end of this discussion.
Holy macaroni.
Yes.
That went like nothing.
Understand that, hey, once you get into one of these discussions, they just roll.
Yeah.
So I guess the last thing is, you have any words of wisdom you'd like to pass on to everybody and take a few minutes?
Yeah, okay. I'd be glad to. So personally, if you are concerned about climate change, you're thinking about your grandchildren, that sort of thing, there are things you can do personally. So obviously you want to cut down on your own emissions, and I recommend that you look at the Mass Save website, because I think they've changed some things and you might be pleasantly surprised. So that's one thing. Remember, costs for oil and gas are going to go up. They're all right. I don't know that for sure, but I think they're going to go up. They've got a lot of issues. The second thing is to think about using your voice politically. Get involved politically. If you're interested in climate change, there's Citizens Climate Lobby on the North Shore. They're focused on what I was talking about, the Green Future Act, and 350 Mass. Those are two groups. There are many more groups. But if you're a student, Our Climate, that's for students. The other thing is, personally, look at your credit card and your retirement fund. So they may be funding fossil fuels. If you don't think that's a good idea, then you could call them up and say, I'd like to go into a program that doesn't fund fossil fuels. And you can do that. So you have power as a citizen and power as a consumer. So don't just throw up your hands and say, oh gosh, it's beyond me. I think those are some things that people could do.
Super. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. And as you probably figure out, this thing can go on for some time. And we'd like to invite you back sometime in the near future to continue the discussion, get into a little more of the details.
Glad to do it.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching us this evening. And as always, if you've got a different opinion or a similar opinion and you would like to have a chance to express your voice, there's always room for you at the table. And thanks again for watching, and stay tuned. We'll do some more.